Today, the Below Average Joe's MMA show for the first time of 2023 present a weekend preview. And we have a jam-packed episode for you guys focused surrounding the last month of MMA that we have missed out on, from news to fight announcements, everything in between. And we're also previewing UFC Vegas, insert number here, headlined by Nassourdine Imavov in his first main event spot, taking on a guy whose last main event was the last UFC event in Sean Strickland. All this and more, and it all starts right now. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Episode 259. 2023 is in full swing, Dominic. We had a very interesting last month or so with no MMA in our lives outside of Bellator Rizin, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But for your UFC, it felt like there was so much more happening outside of the octagon than inside. And in this case, Dom, I don't think that's a very good thing. So a lot to go over. I think this episode will probably be actually more focused on everything that's gone down the last month. But we do have a UFC card this weekend that we will be previewing as well. So how excited are you to be back? How has the last month been for you where you've not had any MMA to watch, but we've obviously still been doing our best to kind of get out content?
Yeah, it's been fun, Noah, and it's great to be back into the swing of things. I believe there's MMA events, UFC specifically, 11 of the next 12 weeks, so we're going to get back into a routine, back into the grind. It feels good. The Joes are here. The Joes are here to stay. We've had a lot of fun expansions and new things to our Below Average Joe's brand over this past month with no MMA, and hopefully most of you have heard or seen some of that by now. If you haven't, it's easy to find here on our channel. But it's great to be back here with our bread and butter, the first thing that the Joes started right here at the MMA show. We've got some somber, unfortunate things to discuss to really kickstart the show, which is never fun, but it's been a wild last month and a very, very crazy beginning of 2023 for this sport, Noah. So how are you?
I'm good. Definitely not looking forward to talking about a few of these topics. They are uncomfortable to talk about, but when you do a show that is surrounding MMA, we have an obligation to do it for the people, that we not only talk about the good things or the things that we like about the sport, we have to talk about the dark side sometimes. We got to talk about some of these realities that are not comfortable. They are not something we want to talk about, but it is important that we address it nonetheless. So without further ado, Dom, I think us just on this one, because I really just want to talk about this one real quick because it happened so long ago, about the passing of Stephan Bonnar at age 45. A really sad loss for the MMA community. Stephan Bonnar is, of course, most known for his time as Ultimate Fighter and for having one of the best fights in UFC history against Forrest Griffin. A fight that really saved the company in a lot of ways, if you are to believe the history as it's been told of the sport. Too young for a guy like that to go. It's very unfortunate. You know, he's had a tough life where he's overcome addictions and, fallen into he's fallen into wrong crowds or whatever you want to call it. But a guy who seemed like he had a big heart, who was a great fighter, who always came to put on a show, and his legacy is everlasting. That season one of The Ultimate Fighter and the event that those two had to cap it off will forever be in the history books. So hopefully there is some solace in that. But I believe there is a GoFundMe for his family. So we will provide links if that is the case, if that's a verifiable GoFundMe. We'll provide the links for that in the description of today's episode, and go support that. Keep his family in your thoughts, or if you are the praying type, in his prayers. Kind of just needed to address that off the top. Dominic, did you have anything you wanted to add about Stephan Bonnar?
You put it pretty beautifully, man. I mean, it's a legend of this game, a pioneer of the UFC. Him and Forrest Griffin saved the company, and they are forever linked, I feel like, in eternity, those two together. So it was a hard loss for the MMA community. Had a few of those over the last year and into this new year for the sport. It's just so hard to see that at these young ages. So obviously, just a legend. His legacy is going to live on for a very, very, very long time in this game. And I hope that even the people that are still coming into the sport, they're going to get to see that fight one day and realize just how important he is to this game right now. So
Well said. And the news doesn't get a Dana White video, of course. This is probably the biggest topic going on in MMA right now. Um, if you've been living under a rock and you don't know what we're talking about, on New Year's Eve, during a family vacation in, I believe it was Mexico or something like that, Dana White, along with his wife, were at a nightclub. Um, a video came out of someone on the ground level recording up at the two of them, who were like up on a second level or whatever. In the video, I, whatever you want to say happened before, I don't know. Dana grabs a wrist, whatever. But his wife, and then the two of them are, separated and whatnot. But a lot has already been said. I've already actually talked about this video on my show, This Week in Sports. But since so much time, I mean, we still have to kind of talk about our thoughts on it. But I also want to talk a little bit about sort of the fallout of this video, responses we're seeing in the community or lack thereof. And Dana actually made a surprise appearance at Media Day and about this video for about 20 minutes. So a lot a lot of directions we can go to start here. I won't ask you a specific question, Dom. I guess thoughts on the video. Maybe just I think it's important for us because we're two guys in our community and in whatever we're doing, this podcasting about MMA, whatever. I would say that out of everybody who does it, I mean, me and Dom have probably been kinder to Dana White than most. I think it's safe to say that we have been fans of him. We enjoy what he brings to the sport, the impact he's had on the sport. A lot don't like him for this reason or that reason, and I completely get it. But for whatever reason, I think the two of us have just always found him to be a great personality for the sport. So it's rather disappointing that something like come out, and that's where I'm going to let you kind of take it away, Dom, on your thoughts and ultimately give your thoughts not just on the video, but the subsequent fallout, the lack of responses from some people, fighters and whatnot, and then Dana's own responses to the situation.
yeah, when it first came out in the new year, the beginning of the new year, it was almost something that I was just like, no way, is this real? Is this really going to happen here? And then you see the video clip, and there's no excuses. We all know it's wrong. At least a majority of us know it's wrong. I know some people have defended him and whatnot, even though he's literally telling people not to defend him. So you're not going to hear any of that here. There is no defending him in this instance. He was in the wrong, point blank, period. That's just the way that we were raised, and a lot of other people in this community share the same thoughts. So it was unfortunate to see really the face of, yes, the UFC, but honestly, he's the face of the whole sport. So it's just it's a black eye on not just the UFC, but the whole sport. I think it does not do very good things whatsoever for the sport at all, and it's already a very, you got to be a little bit strong to watch this sport in the way, the violence and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot, the nature of it. And then when someone as important to the sport as Dana has something like this come out, it just makes it look even worse to the casual audience or people that support other sports but don't watch MMA. Now it just looks even worse. So it's quite a shame that it had to go down like this and that it had to happen. The lack of response has been I mean, again, in our space, in the community, I feel like there are a lot of people that have spoke about it and given their thoughts. But in the grand scheme of things, we're talking ESPN, we're talking the UFC as a whole, so on and so forth. There's been no repercussions. There's been no punishments. And I don't really know what I was expecting if there were to be any of such. But I guess I just wasn't expecting zilch, nada from the organizations as a whole. And then when you get into media day from this week, yesterday, when we're recording this, he did address it again. And I will give him some credit just for taking blame and not making excuses for his actions. So that part is what he should 100% do. And I like that he's telling people not to defend him and that they should not defend him. But then he kind of went into like, well, how do I be punished if you take me away for a leave? It doesn't hurt me, it hurts the company, so on and so forth. And I guess that's where it just kind of, that's where I don't know how much more to say. Like, what is a punishment then? Really, the only real punishment is firing him, I suppose. And I just don't see ESPN and UFC and all that going to those measures. I think because they do, in a way, realize that he is a pretty important piece to this puzzle. I know the UFC can do things without him, and it seems like over the past couple of years, more and more of the back end things are in Dana's hands, and it's guys like Hunter Campbell, the matchmakers, the war room fellas that we talk about a lot on this show that kind of do the heavy lifting, and Dana is just the face, the speaker. He, represents the company. So I don't know, and if you have any ideas, I'd be curious to hear what they are. But all in all, that's about what I can put together, to be honest.
Those were very. I appreciate your thoughts on it, Dom. You actually that was a lot. Not that I was expecting nothing from you, but that I was uh, with such a tough topic like this. It's hard to give such clear and
Mm.
full thoughts, and I think you did that. So good job there. This is obviously my second time talking about this, and really everything Dom said, you can probably copy and paste for me. So I'm not gonna, just say the same thing in different words than what Dom just said. I mean, really everything he said, I agree with. I think the only parts that I'll add on is when it comes to some of the responses from different fighters, specifically like Sean O'Malley. We both like Sean O'Malley a lot. He's a bright, young, up and comer in the sport. I mean, now he's really at the tip top of his
Mm-hmm.
division, potential future champion. And when he says something like, she deserved the good slap, or whatever the wording was specifically, this is a man who has a young daughter,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of gross in my opinion. Everybody has different backgrounds. Everybody comes from different situations that have you've been raised differently, and therefore you have a different code of conduct, a different moral code, whatever you want to call it. Me and Dominic come from pretty similar backgrounds, so we were always raised that under no circumstances is it okay, even in retaliation, even if you are hit first, you should always walk away.
Yeah.
Especially for when I consider a guy like me who's a very large guy. If I'm with if whatever woman would strike me would likely be a lot smaller than me and a lot just tinier than me. So
Mm-hmm.
the kind of damage that I could do with the slap to her is much more substantial than what she could do to me. And Dana
Mm-hmm.
White is in a similar situation where he is a very big guy. He
Yeah.
has got big muscles. His
Yeah.
wife is not some, big, tall woman. She is a normal sized woman. And that's why in that situation, you even after all the years of marriage and whatever, and she has come out and sort of said that it was out of his character and she's not pressing charges or anything. So ultimately, though, he has to walk away from that situation. That's actually going to lead me into my next point where she's not really, her statement said exactly what I just said, that it was out of his character, like
Mm-hmm.
it was not something that's normal. You don't have to believe what she's saying here. I understand that people are going to just assume that, the first time doesn't happen in your 50s. I get that. But ultimately, if she's not pressing charges, if she's kind of just wanting this to go away, ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really understand other people being more offended by what he did than the person who was the victim. I've never really understood that about different situations. It feels like a lot of times nowadays we have people online that get very offended by
Mm-hmm.
actions that did not personally affect them, which is one thing if you are clamoring for support for the victim. But when the victim really just wants it to go away, and by any sort of statement that has been made publicly, any action that's been taken since then, it seems like the focus for them is on their kids and their family just trying to get through this tough time.
Right.
I don't really agree with the people that are still trying to like take it to a certain level. It's one thing to demand answers. It's one thing to demand a comment by Endeavor or
Mm-hmm.
Disney, ESPN, whoever. Like these are definitely worthwhile measures to take. But to go out there and continue saying how much of a piece of shit Dana White is, or that I don't know. It's just stuff like that. It's like, okay, let's try to just don't be the most offended person in a situation that you were not a victim in. That's kind
Mm-hmm.
of, I think, a lesson a lot of people could take. And then ultimately, Dana's response in the media scrum, I think it was great that he took questions about the topic. I wasn't
Yes.
actually that confident that he would.
Yeah.
His original TMZ interview, TMZ, these two fucking chodes from TMZ were trying to give Dana White every out imaginable. We're talking about the amount of alcohol that's served, that she slapped him first, all this stuff. They were trying to offer him every out in the book. And to his credit, he did not take it. And
Mm-hmm.
he has to this day not taken any sort of out. He
Mm-hmm.
has remained stern in that there is no coming back from this, that he has to live with this forever, that he did it. It is his fault, nobody else's. I give him respect and credit for doing all that. Now, when it comes to his response to, well, what kind of punishment should there be? You take me out of here, it just affects the fighters and blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's true. I think we all kind of know at this point that Dana is for sure important and he is a figurehead, but he's really not manning the ship anymore. I think Hunter
Right.
Campbell has taken over a lot of his actual responsibility in terms of fighter negotiations and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. And because of that, really, a lot of people were mad about his response to these questions. I'm not necessarily mad at Dana because Dana is the what's the word, the perpetrator in this action. Like, what do you want him to say? I mean,
Yeah.
he's obviously trying to take personal accountability, but when they're asking him like, "Hey, what should your punishment be?" I don't know. I mean, maybe you'd like him to say, "Well, I think I should be fired," but is that really a realistic response that any of us would give if
No
we
one,
were in a
whatever.
similar
Yeah.
situation?
Right.
So really, where I think the anger should be pointed to is Endeavor and Disney, who have remained completely silent on the
Yeah.
topic. I don't want Dana White to be fired necessarily. I don't. I'm not. It's hard to say like that any sort of reprimand would be too far for something that I feel is completely unredeemable. But I'm just saying I'm not clamoring for his firing. I ultimately still think Dana has a good contribution to the sport. But for him to have nothing really
Right.
happen from this, to have no sort of reprimand at all, feels just gross. And when you consider that Ari Emanuel over with Endeavor has been he's not just, this is, I know when it comes to UFC, we don't really hear him speak a lot. He's sort of a
Yeah.
silent owner, kind of in the background. but truthfully, Dom, the more I've learned is that he's actually very vocal when it comes to these type of issues.
Mm-hmm.
When it's people that aren't under his payroll, aren't affecting his bottom dollar, he has
Right.
sent letters to his associates. When Kanye West, of course, went on his tirade with the Jewish community,
Mm-hmm.
he made a big letter saying for people to, not I forget what all he said, for sponsors to drop him and all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff. He also went after I can't remember who else. He went after someone else, but the point is that he has shown a willingness to really try
Speak up.
to speak up for people who have tried to victimize other individuals or other communities or whatever. And here, with someone who is on his payroll, who does affect his bottom dollar, he has remained silent.
Mm-hmm.
So his silence says a lot more than I think he hoped it would. And the same with ESPN.
I think
And
I'm
now
more
it's,
surprised at that side of the thing, actually.
yeah. I mean, Dom, I think it's safe to say here, if we're ready to kind of shift into reality, nothing's going to come of this. I think that's been proven by what we've seen up to this point. I don't think anything's going to really come from this. It is a black eye on the sport, but I don't think it's a black eye that's going to last all that long. Yeah, sure. For now on, it's hard for Dana. Dana's always been such a aggressive figure and outspoken figure in the sport, as at journalists or at people online or whoever, right? But now I wonder if you'll see a little less of that, because before you really couldn't say a whole lot like that Dana would take personally. Like, he hadn't really done anything. Yes, you could talk about fighter pay and whatnot, but it really kind of ended there. Now you have this on you. So I'm sure in any comment, anytime Dana does an interview or he tweets something, if you read the comments on it, you're going to see a lot of stuff about slapping and power slap and all this stuff. And yeah, that'll be basically his punishment. Like he said, that is true. What he said, that is his punishment, is that he basically just has to live with that sort of label forever. I don't think that's much of a punishment for a very rich and famous and successful guy, but that is ultimately the only punishment he's getting here. So I think the sooner we accept that, it doesn't mean that you should just stop, demanding a response from these people like Endeavor and Disney. But I'm just hoping that by saying this, it will not set up anybody for disappointment. I'm sure people have already been disappointed by the silence up to this point, but that's reality. So, Dominic, anything you'd like to add or respond to that I added on?
That's honestly about everything I feel like that we can
Yeah.
discuss. And if anything else happens, we'll get to it then. But like Noah said, don't really know if anything else will happen. So,
Yeah. Last one, man. It just gets worse. Like, it
yeah.
doesn't it doesn't get any better. This is about former UFC fighter Phil Baroni, who was arrested in Mexico for reportedly murdering his girlfriend. Phil Baroni was a pretty fun fighter back in the day. He was pretty popular during a really tough time for the UFC. Hadn't heard much about him in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
And then this comes out that essentially beat his girlfriend to death, is what is being accused here. She had like upwards of 22 injuries on her body.
Mm-hmm.
Dominic, there's really no good way to even respond to this. There's no good way to talk about this because there's so many internal factors for Phil Baroni and then external factors out of his control that I'm sure led to this happening. If what is being accused is
It's
ultimately what
true.
happened,
Yeah.
I'm sure you can point to the CTE of taking repeated blows to the head. I'm sure you can point to a lot of different things. Roid rage, perhaps. I'm sure Phil Baroni, very thick guy. Maybe he was on PEDs and had a violent temper due to the roid rage, whatever. At the end of the day, the only thing that we can really for surely say about this is just how unfortunate this situation is and just how sad it is. Not only did a woman had to lose her life over this, and this is a situation where the lack, even though the Dana White situation feels a lot less in comparison to this one, and that's because it is. That's why it's dangerous for people like in Endeavor and Disney to not say anything, because it almost paints the picture that this is okay. And
I
even
was going
though
to ask
this,
something about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll kick it to you if you want, but really, that's why, like, even though this is a much more serious and final, someone ended up dead in this situation, you sort of have to treat every situation that involves domestic violence or abuse equally in how in your seriousness you take it with, even if different situations feel less, not every situation leads to a woman being dead because of it. So it's just very unfortunate. Phil Baroni, young, not an old guy by any means, and this
Hmm.
woman wasn't either. And due to, you know, whatever factors were at play, this man never got the help he needed. Don't know what he was angry at or whatever it was. He's going to lose the rest of his life too. He's going to rot in a jail cell essentially. So, such an avoidable situation all around and just very unfortunate. But, Dominic, I'll kind of let you talk if you want to ask me a question or whatever.
First and foremost, thoughts and prayers to the woman in discussion here and for their family. I can't imagine everything that they're going through right now. It's just terrible, terrible news. You never want to hear about it. You never want to talk about it in our space. But just quickly, too, to what Noah said, and obviously this is the most extreme type of scenario. But what does it look like when Dana doesn't get punishment, but then a fighter here in the future, I don't want to say inevitably because I don't want to put
Right.
that out into the air that it
Yeah.
will happen. Let's just say it's likely to happen to some sort of extent, a punch or a push, a slap, whatever the case. What do you do with that fighter then? Because if Dana didn't get in trouble, is the fighter still going to get in trouble? And you best believe that if that's the case, this whole thing with Dana will resurface again when
Hmm.
that happens. So I don't know. I just feel like keep it consistent across the board, regardless of who the person at fault is. I feel like is a great way to approach these types of things, and if there is help to be needed for these people as well, then pursue that as well. You can punish someone for their wrongdoings, and at the same time get them help if they see fit to get that as well. So I don't know. I just That's all. I just want consistency, and unfortunately, with like the Dana situation with nothing happening, I really just wonder what will happen in the future if a fighter puts him or herself into those types of situations. Is all.
Yeah. I don't think it's a bad thing to clamor for, to want um, equal
Right.
equal justice spread around.
Yeah.
But I think the unfortunate part, Dom, is that I think by the lack of response and the lack of any sort of punishment for this actions by the for the actions by Dana White, I think it's pretty clear that that's out the window, because
Yeah.
the standard was set before this incident happened. There's plenty of examples through the UFC's history under the ownership of Dana White and the Fertitta brothers, and then with Endeavor, where a fighter has been accused of assault or domestic violence or whatever it might be. And Dana is on record, 2014, I think he said, you don't come back from that. So
Yeah.
fighters have been let go previously for it. Again, I'm not saying that's the wrong move, but I'm saying it doesn't look good when the guy who was dishing out those punishments previously ended up completely unscathed when he faced a similar situation himself.
Yeah. Well, and there have been other fighters that maybe have not gotten punishment or have been brought into the
Well,
company without.
the most obvious example is John Jones, right? I mean, that just
Well, that's
happened.
one. Greg Hardy is another one
Yeah,
as
well,
well.
the Greg Hardy one, I understand that like him being employed by the UFC and being put on like main cards right away when he was obviously not far enough along in his career to have earned that spot. That didn't look good. You put him on the same card as a woman who had been a survivor of domestic violence. That just is in poor taste. And then, but ultimately, like the what he was accused of did not occur while he was under contract
Right.
with the UFC. It occurred before.
Yeah.
He was cleared of it, but I do agree with you that it's not a good look when you bring a guy in who
Hmm.
became most well known, not for being an NFL player, but for being a
Yeah.
domestic abuser, and then you kind of prop him up on your cards. Doesn't look good. But the John Jones is a good example where, I mean, that was a very just gross
That was a disturbing
situation.
one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure there have been others, like you just said. So it's obvious. And they asked Dana about this at the scrum, and he said it would be a case by case basis, which,
Yeah.
again, I don't know what you're going to expect the guy to say. Like, if he said it's still a no tolerance policy, you can't really say that because you just came out
Hmm.
unscathed from that. So that's an impossible question to answer, but I mean, there was no answer that was going to make anybody happy, and
Yeah.
rightfully
That's
so.
true. That's true.
Anything else on this, Dom? I'm kind of just ready to
We got to get
move
out of
on.
this somber, dark stuff and let's get into some exciting MMA
Yeah.
action
So
now.
we're going to try to transition into some more positive items. Let's start with the one card we did get during this month off, Dom. It was Bellator versus Rizin on New Year's Eve.
Yep.
Best poster of the year, if you ask me.
Right.
But the question is, how did the card turn out? Did you enjoy watching Bellator versus Rizin? It's a lot different. Japanese MMA is just, it feels a lot different. The crowd is a lot different. They obviously
Hmm.
fight in a ring. That's different.
Hmm.
The pageantry is a lot more almost like professional wrestling like. So,
Hmm.
what were your thoughts watching this card?
One, pre-tape fights suck
Yeah.
because you know everything
Yep.
that happened before you get to see them. So that was very
Yep.
unfortunate because it was such a hyped up. Well, nothing under Bellator banner is super hyped up, but to their extent, it was relatively hyped up for them.
Yeah.
And it just, for us here in the States, it didn't really matter because we knew what happened before we even got to see the fight. But the fights as a whole, Bellator obviously goes 5-0, all decisions, all five fights were decisions. And honestly, there weren't any big takeaways for me, Noah, for the most part. I mean, again, we don't get to watch like Rizin or really know much about their fighters, so I wasn't necessarily expecting Bellator to be unsuccessful. But yeah, I mean, they pitched a shutout. They're big guys, Patricio, AJ, Juan Archuleta in specific, even Horiguchi and Godzi, all just got the dubs, and they head to Bellator with some I don't even know,
Some
man. Like
cred, some
some
street cred.
cred.
You
Yeah,
just
like
got to
we're better
win
than
over in
Ryzen or whatever.
Japan, Yeah.
But really, it's just like all this event did was just kind of lead me to believe cross promotion's not that cool when it really is all final and said and done. Like, let's just fight our own people. We're in the
Uh,
organization for a reason. I
I
used to
could
love that
tell.
idea.
I could tell though that your personality, like the way you might say that you used to love that idea, but you like to have things in their own space. Like I feel
Yeah.
like you're the kind of guy, Dom, that when you eat food, you don't like it to touch. You got to have the plates where everything has its own individual, like any sort of intermixing of uh, things like this, not for you.
Right, unless it's a KFC famous bowl. Noah's very right there. So yeah, let's just stick to our own organizations. Let's get our own champions and fight the best and do whatever. Cross promotion just ain't for me, and it shouldn't be for many people after an event like this. It's unfortunate that it kind of just didn't go over well. But again, when it's already all happened, there's not even a point for us here in the States to even watch the damn fights if we already know everything that's going to happen and we see clips all over
Yeah.
Twitter. Like, I don't know, but Well, I'll get into one other thing about AJ McKee when we talk about the next topic, but you can go ahead and talk about this a little bit if you want.
Yeah, so ultimately, I thought the card kind of was a dud.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was actually my first time watching one of these Bellator Rizin New
Yep.
Year's Eve
Same.
events. So I enjoyed the pageantry of it. I kind of enjoyed how it felt different. Felt different from a Bellator broadcast. It felt different, obviously, from a UFC broadcast. Rizin, I think, is a better promotion, Dom, than maybe you think. They do have a lot of really good fighters that come from there. So I was surprised that Bellator pitched the shutout, even though we know a lot more about their fighters and have watched them a little bit further along their journey. But the fights were just not very good. And that's all I really wanted from this because, again, I don't really know much about the Rizin half of this card. So
Right.
I wasn't necessarily looking for a ton of big takeaways, but I wanted good fights. And I
Yeah.
just didn't think the fights were that good. And that's unfortunate. I do think you're right. Like, nothing that Bellator does, it feels all that well promoted. But this was
Yeah.
probably their closest to being a well promoted card. They seemed very much like all hands on deck for this one,
Yeah.
to the point where you had people like Josh Thompson going after the media for not covering the sport. And it just doesn't look great when you do that. And then it turns out the fights are pre taped. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, what are we doing? That completely takes the wind out of the sails. A lot of ship puns in my
Yeah.
saying right now, but it takes the wind out of the sails, and it just made me not all even that excited to watch it. Like if
Yeah.
it was airing live, I understand the time difference. Like you
Right.
gotta, I get it. Like I get it's not an easy solution. But maybe Dom's right that the solution is just to have everybody just go their separate ways. Like
Yeah.
you have a Japanese-based promotion that should probably fight at times that are convenient for a Japanese MMA audience. And
Right.
Bellator is an American
Yeah.
promotion, so they should probably fight at times that are good, that are at least accommodating or relevant to an American audience. It's just maybe you're right because I don't really have like the solution to fix it. I'm just saying that having to watch these fights after knowing what happened felt like homework. And
Yeah. Yeah.
because I saw that every fight was a decision, I was like,
It's gonna take a while.
I'm like, hopefully at least one of these is good.
Yeah.
And then it really wasn't. So
Yeah. Yeah.
disappointing for sure. More Bellator to talk about here, though, Dom. They did announce this one
Mm.
hot off the presses.
Yep. Yep.
Lightweight Grand Prix is coming up, Dom. That is will be the next Grand Prix. And, you know, if you had told me that they would be doing lightweight before I saw the actual fighters that were participating, I have always looked at lightweight as being one of the weaker divisions in Bellator, which is so crazy because it seems like throughout MMA it's probably the biggest
Yeah.
and best division, at least one of them. But then I looked at the names: Usman Nurmagomedov, your champion, of course,
Mm-hmm.
AJ McKee, Tofiq Musayev. Those three right there by itself just make it already worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
But then you got Alexander Shabliy. I never know how to say his last name. Patricky Pitbull, Mansour Barnoui, Benson Henderson, and Sidney Outlaw. So
Yep. Yep.
I actually think they put together a pretty good lineup for this Grand Prix. It may not get me as excited as last year's Bantamweight Grand Prix did, but nonetheless, I think it's pretty good. Any thoughts on this one? I know you said you had, I'm assuming I should also plug that this did come with the announcement that AJ McKee had re-signed with Bellator. I'm pretty sure that's
Yeah.
what you were going to say, right? So
Yep.
he does remain with Bellator. So I'll ask you your thoughts on the Grand Prix, and then I'll also ask you, Dom, were you surprised that AJ McKee is remaining with Bellator?
At one point in time, I feel like I would have said yes, but no, I wasn't that surprised. It's a multi-year deal, multi-year contract. I'm sure it's lucrative. All 20 plus of his fights have been under the Bellator banner, and it's not going to change anytime soon. I bet Bellator is willing to go above and beyond to keep him there, and I respect him for it. Get the money, man. If that's what you want, go get it. And he's very much so, I should say, an elite fighter in Bellator. So I'm excited to see how he'll perform at 155 in this Grand Prix now. I know obviously there's 4 people that they haven't necessarily matched up yet: Patricky, Sidney, AJ, and then Mansour. But they do have Usman versus Benson and Tofiq versus Alexander at Bellator 292 on March 10th. So it starts off here in under 2 months, I guess, officially from the time you're seeing this episode. So it's exciting. I do enjoy the Grand Prix that Bellator does. I wish they would promote them more. I wish they would promote all of their things more, but especially these because they are a big deal. We got to see the conclusion of one in Chicago live, and it was awesome. It's just knowing that there weren't a lot of people outside of the arena tuning in on TV to watch it is a little bit upsetting, but I hope they promote this well. There's a lot of really great fighters, a lot of great talents, and I enjoy these types of tournaments. It's cool, man. Like, the UFC does their thing, right? The basic fighting in the rankings, yada, yada, yada. You got Bellator that do the Grand Prix style brackets, and then you have PFL who do their regular season playoffs and championships. So it's 3 very different things that really make me want to watch all 3 promotions, and that's what I like, and that's what I want more of in the future. So I'm here for it. It's exciting.
Yeah, definitely like the Grand Prix. As far as AJ McKee re-signing, I think after his performance against Patricio in their second fight, that kind of answered to me what direction he was going to go. He was very cocky in the lead up to that fight, saying he didn't even need to train anymore. He wasn't doing his homework for that fight, whatever. He said a lot of things. And then he was talking about free agency and he could go to wherever he wanted. And that's great if you win the fight, and he didn't win the fight. And it wasn't a great
Right.
fight either. He didn't look all that great in it. So I kind of expected this, and I'm happy with it. I even though Bellator I have a lot of frustrations with, ultimately I don't want them to go away. I would like to see them thrive and get better and succeed. And in order to do so, they have to have top level fighters, and AJ McKee is a great fighter. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that he's staying there. Of course, I know in the past we've debated this topic, Dom, because the idea of him going to the UFC and fighting some of the top guys there is a very exciting proposition. But
Right.
I tend to be of the I tend to kind of view these things now as not necessarily about bringing as much talent into the UFC as possible, but having enough talent balanced out, like giving guys opportunities to be the guy. And
Yeah.
that and the more promotions you have, a guy like Shane Burgos can go from being just the guy in the UFC to being the guy in PFL. So I like to
Right.
have guys get those kind of opportunities. So I'm all for that. So that's it for like the news portion of this whole recap segment of the last month. But Dominic, we got a lot of fight announcements too.
I gotta pop
So
this
I'm
up. No,
going
I have
to
to.
I am going to list them off.
Whew.
And as we do at this point, yes, usually we do this in our recap episodes, but since
Yeah.
there were so many and we had been off for a month, figured we'd take care of them now.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to list them off, and just how we normally do, you'll tell me what sticks out to you, Dom. February 18th is looking like a really good card. Your main event, Corey Sandhagen versus Marlon Chito Vera. Co-main
Oh.
event, Erin Blanchfield versus Taila Santos. February 25th, a week later, we see the return of
Yeah.
Tatiana Suarez.
That's
Dominic
right.
said Dominic said she would be champion by August of 20 fought since 2020 or 2019. So she is back against Montana De La Rosa. Then March 4th, UFC 285. Jeff Neal versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. That has been rebooked for that card. Derek Brunson versus Dricus Duplessis. Then UFC 286, 2 weeks later on March 18th, Jennifer Maia taking on Casey O'Neill. And April 8th, or excuse me, March 25th, a week after that, Sean Brady versus Michelle Pereira. And April 8th, Rob Font versus Adrian Yanez. So a lot of fights there, Dominic. What's sticking out to you? What are you enjoying most from this list?
Can I just pick every one of them? I mean, man, that's a great big old list that has came out over the past couple of weeks. Sandhagen, Marlon Vera, I think is. Let me look. Yeah, I think that's the one that excites me the most in terms of like what is going to happen in the cage. That is
Right.
such a sick main event. And then if I have to give an honorable mention, because I had to do this, Tatiana Suarez, the return at flyweight, 125 pounds. Saw a lot of people throwing slander that they're giving her Montana De La Rosa. What's the deal? What's the deal with that? She
Yeah.
hasn't fought in 3 years. Montana's not a scrub. I
No.
think Montana's a pretty good fighter. She's relatively young into the game still. I see no problem with that being her return fight. I'll be curious to see what the betting odds are when that fight comes around. And please, I just hope that it can stay put together, because we've had an announcement before of her return, but then more injuries happen. So if she can stay clear for a month and a half longer, and I see her getting that cage, I am so pumped to see her back and up 10 pounds as well. That's very intriguing to me. So I'm going to go with those two. I had to say two.
Would it shock you if the fight I'm most excited for on this list is Erin Blanchfield versus Taila Santos?
No, it's awesome. It's awesome.
I mean, I'm kind of upset it's not a main event. I'm upset that they are putting fucking Derek Lewis and the Polar Bear in a main event spot, and this has to be a co-main spot. Like, don't get me wrong, that's a great 1-2 punch. You get Sandhagen, Vera, and then this in the co-main. And I wish more of our fight night cards had that kind of at least 2 big fights on it. But man, this is the kind of fight I want to be a main event, so I'm slightly disappointed by that. But I won't focus on that. Because, Dominic, I really think the winner of this is potentially your next women's flyweight champion. It's hard for anybody to beat Valentina Shevchenko.
Right.
That's for sure. But Taila Santos, in my opinion, came very close and maybe should have won.
Yeah.
Erin Blanchfield looks like an absolute stud.
Yeah.
And obviously Taila Santos proved how good she was. If Erin Blanchfield came in here and beat Taila Santos, I think Valentina's throne is a little uncertain right now. That's all I'm going to say. So I'm really excited for that fight. But Dominic, the reason why I put that over the main event, Sandhagen versus Vera, is I want to get your thoughts on this. That is an amazing fight if you just take it as it is, right? Sandhagen, Vera, 2 top-level guys, great striking matchup. Marlon Vera has been on a tear, looking to put himself into a potential title shot position, while Sandhagen's had been fighting everybody at the top for the last couple of years and is looking to get himself back into that same position. My question is, though, Dom, is this the right fight to book next for these two? Because I look at this fight, and as excited as I am for it, I just imagine if you took out Corey Sandhagen and you put in Sean O'Malley, I would be even more excited for this fight. Because I wonder if we're missing an opportunity to run that fight back between Sean O'Malley and Marlon Vera. As big as those two have become since that first fight, as controversial as that first fight was, the amount of talking these two have done since that fight about each other, at each other, the only thing that could make this, if it'll be a huge miss unless they somehow are able to time it up that these two fight for a title. That's the only way they can capitalize at this point.
100%. 100%. That's what I was going to say.
I do wonder, like, if the reason they didn't book it is because maybe they're trying to hold Sean O'Malley for a title fight. I do wonder, even though there's talks of Cejudo and Sterling, you got Sterling coming out and saying he's not going to be ready in March, even though that had been the date that we all thought that fight was going to be booked for. Who knows what's going to happen there? It's always something. There's always something with Cejudo and Sterling. There's always injuries and they talk shit and say they're going to fight on this date and then they're not ready for that date. I don't know what's going to happen. So all in all, Blanchfield Santos, that's the one I'm most excited for. Tatiana Suarez, that'll be fun. Shavkat Rakhmonov, Jeff Neal. As good as Jeff Neal looked in his last fight, this is an uphill battle for sure.
Yeah,
but it makes
that was supposed to be our co-main this weekend.
Yeah, that's really a shame. That's such a shame. God damn it, that's such a shame.
Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder. Anyways, let's talk about UFC Vegas insert number here, Dom, because
all right,
it is time for that. It is time to preview this weekend's card. Your odds come from PointsBet Sportsbook, correct, Dom? That's still
this is true.
PointsBet Sportsbook. Your main event, A bit of a shakeup here in the 11th hour. Kelvin Gastelum no longer. Now, Sean Strickland, the man who was in the main event of your last UFC event of 2022, will main event to start 2023 opposite Nassourdine Imavov. The odds are literally basically a pick 'em here. You got minus 105 for Strickland, minus 115 for Imavov. I'm going to ask you an interesting question here, Dom, because the shakeup, Kelvin was supposed to be here, and then it's Strickland. Strickland having just fought, wasn't a great fight with Cannonier. What's your excitement level for this main event? Like, how excited are you actually for this fight?
Uh,
And if it wasn't for the fact that we hadn't had MMA or UFC in a month, would you be even less excited?
Well, yeah, that's for sure. It's not. I don't know what to really make of this fight.
Yeah.
Because to be truthful with you, I wasn't that excited for Kelvin versus Nassourdine. So it's kind of I don't know. Honestly, this is a bigger opportunity for Nassourdine because he's fighting number 7 instead of number 13. I guess you want to put it that way. Sean Strickland just fought less than a month ago on December 17th. He took this fight on what does that say? January 9th. The fight happens on January 14th. I mean, respect to the guy. He's a dog. We know that goes in there and he fights, man. So I think it could be a good fight, but I don't know. Maybe it's just the lack of storylines. But when we only have 5 days for the main event to be a thing, I guess you can only come up with so many of them. Sean is taking a big chance here, I think, by giving up his number 7 spot potentially to Nassourdine. For Nassourdine, I mean, there's really no. I mean, even a loss here, it's still short notice for him, and it's against a better opponent. And when it comes to the number next to their name, so yeah, I think it'll be an okay fight. I think it'll potentially go all 5 rounds as Sean Strickland main events do, and there'll be a relatively decent amount of action. At least I hope so.
I'm excited for Imavov, his first main event spot. He's looked really good over the last couple of years. And that's kind of where my excitement sort of ends. And I do want to give both guys credit for taking this fight, especially Sean Strickland to step up, being that he just fought a 5-round fight and lost, and now he's like, I'm getting back in there. Saw an opportunity to jump in. He deserves a lot of respect and credit, so I don't mean to slight him by saying, I'm not excited for him to be back in there. But, I mean, Dominic, the truth is I'm just not. And a lot of that is because he has just not been that fun of a fighter to watch. He's fun in the lead up. You watch his media scrums, he's fun. But then the fight itself is always like, it's fine. It's at best fine.
Except for the Cannonier one. I think that's an exception.
I didn't think that was very good, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, the Jack Hermanson fight, I don't even know the last time I'd really say he had a good fight. I mean, he's a great fighter, but he's smart. Really, he is a smart fighter. As crazy as he sounds sometimes, the way he talks, he does a very good job of, what do I always say, the technical brawler. That's really that's something that he is better at than most guys in this company. But the biggest reason I'm not excited for this fight, Dom, is because actually everything you said would be true if this fight were at 185 pounds. But it's at 205 pounds.
Oh, shit. I had no idea. But it makes sense. I mean, he took it on 5 days, I guess.
Right. So I had read that on Twitter. So it's at 205 pounds. So ultimately, I don't think there's any stakes for this fight.
Yeah, damn.
They both deserve credit for taking it, and it would say something if Imavov came in here and knocked out Sean Strickland. I don't care if it's at 205 pounds. That says something.
Yeah.
If Sean Strickland came in here and knocked out Imavov, I'd say the same thing. But ultimately, there is an asterisk by it because it won't change the rankings at all because the UFC will not view it as a middleweight fight. And ultimately, this main event doesn't really have much stakes. Yes, it may affect where these two get booked next. If Imavov wins, he might surely get a guy even higher than 7, even though he'd still be under 10. But that's about it. And really, the UFC hasn't been consistent at doing that. You look at what happened to the Leech, man.
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
Yeah, ultimately, I just don't think there's a lot to really get up for with this fight.
Yeah, that's kind of the best way to put it, I think, that phrase.
Man, that was a real downer of a preview there. Should we go back to talking about Dana White's slap video? Like, really bring things up a notch, I guess?
Right.
Let's get into the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Because we got a couple more fights to talk about. There are some good ones on this card for sure. I think Dan Ige versus Damon Jackson's a very good fight. That's now your co-main event. Dan Ige still ranked number 13 in the division. Damon Jackson, very close, and this is his opportunity to jump right in. And you get a big clash of styles here because Dan Ige puts a lot of pop in his punch. He's got great power. He's shown an ability to have the knockout in one punch. Gavin Tucker, that was a great knockout. While Damon Jackson, very good grappler, got great submissions. His issue is that he's not very durable. A lot of his losses have come via knockout. While Dan Ige, I think his issue is that he is not the most complete fighter in the company. I think he's got a couple skills that are very high level, but I think the majority of his game is at, like kind of a decent level, but not all that great. And his grappling would be one of those that I'd say that about. So it's a great fight. It's going to be whoever style can overtake the other. Can Damon Jackson get the fight to where he wants to get it to, or can Dan Ige land a good shot and end the fight? I lean Dan Ige, truthfully, even though I would love to see Damon Jackson continue this winning streak and put himself in line to fight a top 10. I just think it's one of the tough matchups for him in this top 15.
Yeah, and if you want to keep the discussion rolling on terms of polar opposites, you want to talk about the momentum here for both guys. Dan Ige lost 4 of his last 5 and 3 in a row. Damon Jackson has won 4 of his last 5, and all four of those wins have come consecutively. So he's riding the biggest hot stretch of his career. Dan Ige is in the biggest lull of his career, and now here you go. They got a clash, and by the way, Damon Jackson gets a shot at top 15. Dan Ige gets a chance to lose his top 15 ranking. There's a lot at stake in this fight. Honestly, this fight probably has the most stakes of all the other fights on the card, maybe outside of one of the women's fights that we will discuss, but this is very important for both guys for where they are in their career right now.
Everything you just said about, stock being high on Damon Jackson, low on Dan Ige, considering where their paths have gone up to this point. And yet, who's the favorite in this fight, Dom?
Dan Ige minus 120, Damon Jackson plus 100.
I think that should tell you something. If you are someone who is looking to bet on this fight, I am still suspended, so I will not be betting on this fight. But if I did, I would be hammering Dan Ige after taking that information in, seeing the betting lines the way they are. What is the reason that Dan Ige is the favorite in this fight? Everything tells you that he has hit his ceiling and is finding out that he is not really in that top 10, top 15 edge, while Damon Jackson has been doing very good against, just under top 15 level competition. And now he has a chance with the momentum on his side to get another win. He has an advantage over Ige in the grappling and submissions, and yet he's the underdog. Ige.
Ghost bet pick number 1 for Noah.
Yep,
Just been
ghost
released.
bet. That has been one of my ghost bets for this weekend. So the next fight we're going to talk about, Dom, Ketlin Vieira taking on Raquel Pennington. This women's bantamweight division has been kind of just dead.
Blah.
Really, since we started this podcast. I mean, we are Dom, we are 2.5 years basically into this. And have we ever gotten up for a women's bantamweight fight? I mean, maybe
I feel
the
like
rematch.
we hardly ever even see fights happen in the division.
Yes, women's featherweight gets a lot of hate from us. But, I mean, shit, at least it's funny to make fun of Lad Dumont. What has bantamweight had? It's the difference between, have you ever watched a movie, Dom, that was like so bad it was good?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Ready to Rumble, I think, is a good example.
Oh, that's
a
perfect example for us, yeah.
Yeah, like if so bad it's kind of funny just how bad it is kind of thing. And then have you ever watched the movie that was just boring as shit, and you were like falling asleep, and you're like, I want to turn this off. Like, there's just nothing even interesting about it.
Yeah.
Trying to think of an example of that kind of movie for me. I mean, just like I don't know, like a National Geographic documentary. Like, who the fuck cares? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Which one are you going to rather want to watch? You're going to want to watch Ready to Rumble over that
Right.
movie that's going to put you to sleep. That's kind of how I feel about women's bantamweight versus women's featherweight. I understand bantamweight's the better division, but women's featherweight, sometimes you get fucking main events between Norma Dumont and Aspen Ladd, and it's kind of more fun to sort of watch it and then kind of hate watch it and make fun of it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really all I have to say about this. But Dominic, I think if you really look at this fight, though, the winner of this may be getting a title shot, especially if it's Ketlen Vieira.
Yeah, this is the biggest fight we've had at women's bantamweight since we've started the show.
That's not true.
Because no one in the top 5 ever fights each other, and if they're scheduled to fight, it never goes to the cage. There's always something getting canceled.
Okay, you took it too far. Way blasphemous statement. Well, I mean, if you want to talk about title fights that we've had, I mean,
obviously I'm not talking about the title fights, and we've not even had many of those. We've only had 2 of those, I think.
Okay, so you want me to name like a contender fight that was bigger than this?
When the top contenders fight or are booked to fight, it either is a dud and nothing comes of it, or the fight doesn't even happen. I don't even know if this fight's going to happen yet, Noah, until Saturday night.
Oh, God, you might be right. I can't really think of anything.
But you are right. The winner will fight for the title next. I strongly believe that. Ketlen's won 2 in a row. Raquel's
both in main
won 4
events,
in a row.
by the way.
Yes, true. And the resurgence for Rocky Pennington, regardless of you like her fight style or not, I think it's awesome, this resurgence.
Yeah,
she
I
lost
agree.
to Amanda in 2018 in a title fight that she got pummeled in. You never thought we'd see much else from her. Look at her. She's won 4 in a row. She even has a finish in that winning streak. I mean, dude, if she can get back to a title shot, I think that's awesome for her. So.
Is it kind of telling that the UFC put Ketlen Vieira in back-to-back main events? Neither one was received well, and now she's kind of buried on this main card. Like, is that something? Am I looking too much into that? That the UFC might just be like they might have been in on her for a second, and then they were like, well,
yeah,
you know, she's not she just doesn't. The fans don't seem to be buying into her. But I mean, truthfully, Dom, you have to wonder. You watch these kind of fights, and it's hard to get super excited for them. But I implore anybody listening, watching, that watches week to week, you know, all these UFC events, start really familiarizing yourself with these women and their styles, because I'm telling you, Amanda Nunes's days are numbered as a UFC fighter, I believe.
Yeah.
And if she were to retire this year, which is an if, but if she did, Ketlen Vieira and Raquel Pennington could be the type of fight you would see for a vacant title.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it feels like a division. It feels like a division that once Amanda is for sure gone, we could be playing hot cake with that belt for a long time. Like, no long-standing champions in this division right now. As it stands, there's no big up-and-coming prospects that are coming to my brain right now. All the top 5 have like literally all fought for a title except for Ketlen and Irene Aldana. But when they get that moment, they lose. So, like, I don't know. I don't see a long-standing champion here for a long time.
The only 2 that I could see making a title reign is Ketlen and Irene Aldana, but it wasn't too long ago when Aldana got outclassed by Holly Holmes. So
yeah,
I don't know. Vieira seems like a safe bet to maybe be that next champion, which is kind of like, I mean, just okay. I guess that's what we're gonna do here. So
yeah.
Next fight here. This one's a good one. Umar Nurmagomedov taking on Heoni Barcelos. Barcelo's been a severely underrated fighter in the company for a long time. Meanwhile, Umar Nurmagomedov he's smish.
Yeah, minus 850, by the way, odds for Umar.
So. Minus 850?
Minus 850, yep.
There's no... Look, I'm banned. I'm suspended from betting MMA again. I'm going to keep saying that every time, but... they will not convince me to bet against a Nurmagomedov or a Shabliy, like whatever. Like I ain't betting against any of them because I did that when I wasn't it Umar who was a massive favorite against the guy from Kentucky.
Nathan Manis.
Yeah, wasn't that Umar? And
Yeah.
I took Manis because I'm like, wait, Manis is a good fighter.
They were
No,
both
I mean
undefeated. Yeah.
he's good, but no,
There's levels.
he got smashed, and
Yeah.
Barcelos will probably get smashed too. But he is a very underrated fighter. So this is a good I don't think this is I don't think the matchmaking's at fault here. I think Umar's just that good. I think Barcelos is very good. He is the kind of fighter that could be in the top 15 if not for how stacked this division is. I think the matchmaking's fine here.
Yeah, Umar's number 11, and I feel like they probably just made this because no one else wanted to fight him right now. So he's
That could be
fighting
true.
out of the rankings
Yeah.
with Barcelos. I do like Raoni Barcelos. I do think he's a very good fighter. He's got a solid record, 17-3, 6-2 in the UFC. It's just, man, Umar just looks like he is that guy, pal. He looks like he's that guy. He's 9 years younger, 26 versus 35 years old. If I'm not mistaken, and I saw this going around on Twitter, and it could be different now, but I think that there is a way that you can get that minus 850 into plus money if you take Umar by finish. I think that's risky because he's finished 8 out of 15. But if you want to just try and get him down a little bit, maybe that's your path there. But I just don't know if I feel comfortable with him finishing Barcelos.
Right. Barcelos is very good, so
yeah.
He's a durable guy. Well, I guess I forgot to mention this in our news portion, so we can kind of talk about it now. How about Habib? Looks like he's going to be retiring from coaching.
Yeah.
I was shocked when I read this. Has this been speculated for a while? Because it didn't seem like anybody was all that shocked but me.
Not that I know of. I think he kind of said, I kind of want to be done, focus on family and business, and that was
good
it.
for him. So. Good for him.
Because we would see him this weekend if that weren't the case. So
I mean, this guy is he walked away from fighting at the peak, at his best, and now he's done the same with coaching. I mean, props to him for not sticking around too long. I mean, coaching, I feel like he definitely could have continued if that was his passion, if that's where he wanted to put his energy, but can't blame him for wanting to focus on family and other business endeavors. Maybe we'll finally get some real merch with him and Hasbullah or something. Have a little NFT project, maybe. I don't know. I don't even know what an NFT is. So.
Me neither.
It just seems like it's something that always ends up being a scam. Every time I hear about NFTs, it's fucking Logan Paul scamming people. You got that diddle fuck that just got arrested, FTX shit. I don't understand any of it. But
me neither.
These are two smart guys talking crypto on here. So
Yep.
shout out to Habib, but it'll be sad to watch him kind of walk away from the sport almost entirely. I almost wonder if he's going to be you see it in other sports, those guys that walk away and they don't really stay in the sports. So they're kind of become one of those guys that, yes, his legacy is so big in the sport that he's always going to be remembered, but are we really going to be hearing much about Habib in the next few years or 20 years? Is he really going to be around all that much?
I know. I hope so. Selfishly, of course.
Yeah. But that's it. We are going to move into our last segment, Dom. We only end the show one way, and that's with the little closing statements, the part of the show where me and Dom can talk about anything and everything, MMA related or not. So, Dominic, any closing statements for today?
We go a whole month without an MMA preview or recap, and then I come here, and am I really ready to give a closing statement? Oh, I'll just ask a question because it's kind of trendy with This Weekend in Sports. Shameless plug. Check out the new episode. It dropped today. The day we're recording this yesterday when you're hearing this episode.
Yeah, thank you.
Who is everybody taking for the Super Bowl this year? Playoffs start this weekend, the wild card round. Who is everybody taking in the Super Bowl? If I had to pick right now one team, I find myself hard-pressed to still not pick the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, if I had to pick right now today to put money or a bet on it, I'm going to pick the
You bastard.
I'm so sorry.
This is why I didn't do a playoff prediction on my podcast, because I'm very biased and I can't help it.
You got a dog in the fight, man.
I do. I do believe the Cincinnati Bengals can win the Super Bowl, and I believe they will win the Super Bowl. And I believe they will do so by beating the San Francisco 49ers.
I think they're in there for sure in the NFC side. Yeah.
Yeah. Although Philadelphia, I mean, if they didn't look great in Week 18, Jalen Hurts came back for that game. But if they get a week off, they're the 1 seed. Anything can happen. They played very well for most of the year, so having him back is massive. I do think, though, Dom, if I had to give a second pick, I actually think I'd go Buffalo. Not only are they like one of the obvious top teams in the league, but now after this DeMar Hamlin situation, you got to feel like that's that extra like of just like emotion and I guess kind of motivation it would add to this group of guys to go win that game. I couldn't imagine it. So I do think that not to use that situation as like some sort of like it's going to give these guys special powers or something, but I do think that they feel like they're playing for something bigger right now, even though he seems to be doing okay. Like, this is a guy who I'm sure his football future is still up in the air.
Yeah.
And they want to go out there and win it for him because he should be out there with them, So
yeah, it would be a storybook ending. Oh.
Yeah. But I really think that the winner of the Super Bowl is going. I think there's 4 teams realistically right now that I would say could win the Super Bowl, have a good chance. And that's 49ers,
Yep.
the Bengals, Bills, and Chiefs. I think those are the 4 teams. I mean, I do think some people will put the Eagles in there. I just, you could not make it 5. Like Vikings, I don't think are making it. Don't see the Jaguars or Chargers or Ravens, obviously, or especially if Lamar's not playing.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's really like a 5-team race, and I even go as far as saying 4.
Yeah, your boys are hot, man. The Bengals are one of the hottest
Haven't
teams
lost.
in the league.
We were 4-4, have won 8 straight. So
Yeah, it's
hopefully-
impressive
well,
shit.
Yeah, 8 straight that went to conclusion, I should say.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't really have anything to add on. I think that's a good way to kind of wrap it up. So my name's Noah Baker. That's Dominic Slee. We are but just 2 of the Below Average Joes, and we'll see you guys on Monday.